We are finally here. It took us a long time, but we are finally at a chapter that involves Lymond in a brothel. Oh gosh. So this is part 2, chapter 1, Smothered Mate of Game of Kings by Dorothy Dunnett. I know they say this every time, but every single chapter I read, I just feel like this is the best chapter so far. This is amazing. But this is the greatest chapter so far. So page 163, we are at Branksome. I really love the description of Lord and Lady Buchler, so Janet and Sir Watt, pursuing their own highly individual courses, talking to each other about whatever came into their heads, and then on the next page, in a childless oasis at the one end of the big hall. This is so great. They have their marriage sorted. I don't think, I mean, most people would probably think that if you're a husband and wife walking around doing your own separate things without really interacting much in a childless oasis, that probably seems a bit cold, but I don't think the author meant it in that way. It's just their marriage, and to me it sounds like such an ideal marriage. You're just doing your own things, someone is looking after your kids and putting them to bed, and you can just hang out and maybe talk to each other. It is ideal, I'm not joking. I do think there's a lot of tension between Janet and Watt. I don't think that they are the best of friends, but putting that aside, they seem to have, they've got their situation sorted. They know what they're doing. Their life is pretty darn great. How many kids do they have? What? Like, I'm coming to think they have like 8 kids or something. But let's go to the sad part of this chapter, and every time Richard appears, my heart just grips. He's like, he has an arrow through my heart, poor Richard. We've got here also on page 164, Richard is saying to Sir Watt, I've already gathered that you have no intention of helping me. I wondered if perhaps you meant actively to hinder me instead. Oh, Richard. Oh, I just want to hug Richard and say, it's okay, it's not your fault. You got the short end of the straw, but you're doing so good and it's not your fault. It's not your fault that your mother is working behind your back and has convinced Sir Watt conveniently to help him. And so for Richard, this whole situation where he's trying his best to actually capture Lymond so that he stops causing chaos, he feels like he's doing it in a vacuum. He's isolated. No one seems to support him. It's his own brother, for God's sake. Like, he's probably struggling emotionally, but everyone's just like, we're not going to help you. It's just heartbreaking. And he just must feel so abandoned and isolated. And then we go page 167 where he's saying, I tell you, Lymond has taken 3 months to kill all the years of my childhood. He'll destroy Will Scott in a week. Richard is not okay. He's not. In this statement, we can see that, and especially later on, how Lady Buchler is looking at Richard and saying, God, if your conscience is as tender as that, like, she's seeing that he's hurt, that he's struggling in his own way. And of course he is. In this statement, we can see that Richard was really close with Frances. We didn't know that. It's not entirely clear up until now how close the two brothers are, but now you can definitely see that they must have been quite close. They grew up together, and it's just so sad that, you know, Richard has lost probably his best friend through life, and he's just dealing with that by himself. I think at this stage Richard is torn between his pain and grief and also anger. Like, there is, like we saw in the previous chapters, there is fire underneath him. And I think what's going to happen soon is this anger's going to win. I mean, he was just shot. He was just shot in the shoulder by Lymond. Like, he probably had some patience for Lymond, thinking, I could help him. But that little voice is getting weaker and weaker. And the voice of, I need to destroy him, is getting stronger. But we see the pain and the conflict. Going back to page 165, I just love it when people, every time we have characters who aren't Lymond and his crew, they're often just talking about Lymond and like trying to figure out what the hell's going on, and it's just so great. Page 165, this is such a great line. What unnatural sort of corruption is Will to meet at Lymond's that's new in the French court? So this was Will, who's been over in France, and has probably been learning a whole bunch of corrupting things in the French court. And Janet's just thinking, oh no, this is so what? He's thinking, surely Will be fine. He's got strength of character. He's not going to be seduced too much by Lymond, right? I mean, I do agree that his son has got like a bit of spine. He has some backbone. But I do think that he's discovering a lot more than what he learnt in France with Lymond. Sibylla, this is page 166 when she rocks up. We are not fooled by you. We know that you are here to keep an eye on Bucklew. You're worried that he's gonna give in to Richard and send the dogs out. The dogs, by the way? Why does Richard not have dogs? Why is Richard having to rely on Bucklew for these dogs? There was like a whole list of his favourite activities that Andrew Hunter was trying to justify to Mariotta, but was dogs not included? I mean, that's a convenient plot hole. We see what you did there, Dunnett. Because this whole thing, if they still have the gloves that Lymond used to shoot Richard with, and Richard had his own dogs, he could have sent them after Lymond. That would have been another story. So I do like how Sibylla comes in, and every time that we see her, there's always some sort of description of her controlling her temperament and her expression. And here we've got she hugged the small self-contained figure. So she's controlling herself very well. This is page 166. I am not convinced that she's in on everything with Lymond. I think she's just genuinely trying to rescue Lymond in her own way. Anyway, so I'm very interested in this potential arrangement between Richard and Janet, and to see what's going to happen out of that. I am a bit confused about Janet and why Janet is so keen to help get Will back. You know, if they kill Lymond, that means Will be captured and brought back, and then he will have to face his crimes, but probably Will wouldn't be killed for them because he could plead one way or the other. And I think Bucklew thinks he could convince his son just to like plead that he was seduced and that he regrets his actions or something like that. And Janet seems to think, I don't know why she has such a motivation to make that happen. Maybe she really does care for Will. Maybe she really cares for her husband and wants to see that them reunited. I don't know. It is a bit weird. I don't really understand this character's motivations. Janet's motivations. Okay, moving on. Page 168. Yay! We get finally like an around the fire scene at Lymond's camp. I've been waiting for these. I could read a whole book, I think, of just the goings on of the camp of Lymond and all the men and what they're doing. I think I could read literally like 400, 500 pages of that. I would be fine with that. Anyway, we do get finally a little bit more of Crouch interacting with all of the boys. I'm just going to call them the boys. Hilariously here, page 168, Will Scott. This is such good characterization. Will Scott, sprawled elegantly over a chair, had in 2 months found a certain style and was enlarging on it. It's like Will has waltzed into this camp of men, been given pretty much third in command straight up by just existing and being who he is. And he's loving it. And I think Will especially loves it when Lymond's away, because he's kind of ruling the roost. What was Lymond called? The golden goose. Sorry, he's like the silver goose and he loves it. He's just lapping it up. Page 169, we find out, and I assume that every time we learn a piece of information that it is the first time it's mentioned, because Dunnett is like, I'm going to mention things once, and if you haven't paid attention, that is not my problem. So a lot of other books that you read, it's like usually when there's something really important that the author wants the reader to know, they mention it multiple times. Not this book. Nope. So it's mentioned that Lymond was a prisoner in England after the Battle of Solway Moss, or the one of the big Scottish battles between Scotland and England, and he was brought back to England, which I assume is where he started to weasel his way into the English court and make connections with his charm. I mean, actually, it's not entirely clear what exactly has happened in England, and I don't think we're supposed to know, but we do know at least now the reason that he was looking for Mr. Crouch, because someone has given away all of his secrets that he was trying to do in super secret time, and probably ruined a lot of his plans or something. Maybe the reason that Lymond wants Jonathan Crouch, or the other two, Somerville or Harvey, maybe he's just totally made that story up and he wants them for another reason. I don't know. But I mean, between Johnny Buller and Will, Johnny is definitely more like Lymond than Will is in terms of how he speaks. Johnny is just so carefree and he's such a tease to Mr. Crouch. Oh my goodness. Johnny and Lymond probably met each other in like some bar just by chance, and they were looking at each other like, oh my god, we are so similar, let's do a thing together. But yeah, it's so interesting to think that Lymond was kidnapped, and that is the point, that must have been the turning point of his life, because his family would have missed him. What, did they try to get him back? Did they offer money? Like, what happened here? Richard would have been really stressed out. Was his father still alive then? All these questions. Right, now, page 170. Here we have Matt, who starts to join in on the conversation where they're talking about Lymond, and he's just like, getting PTSD because he's like, Lymond doesn't like us talking about him behind his back, but he does it anyway, with the justification that it's common knowledge. But it's just so cute how loyal Matt is, and also kind of funny to think about the previous occasions where he's been caught. Like, what did Lymond do to him? Because Matt is very obedient. And then of course Lymond walks in, and in the exact dramatic fashion that we would expect no less of for Lymond these days, forever, and proceeds to gaslight Mr. Crouch so terribly. I was like, Lymond, you are gaslighting this poor guy, basically trying to convince Mr. Crouch that he's better off being at the camp, which is not true. Lymond could easily let him go. Maybe Lymond thinks that other people will try to find Mr. Crouch now, but he could easily find a way to safely get him back home. He gaslights him to convince him otherwise. And then, so this is like page 171, 172, when Jonathan Crouch is like, can I just go? Lymond is like, yeah, sure. Fragment by fragment. Absolutely. This is where we get glimpses of dark Lymond and the fact that we, like, murderer, liar, professional actor Lymond, who has some serious shit in his head that he has to sort out. We get these glimpses occasionally, and it goes from really sort of comedic in how he's interacting with someone to just like, oh no, let's not fuck with him. A couple of things here. So back at page 171, Will calls Lymond a sir. Is that new? I wonder at what point are we now? Is Will thinking that he can still outsmart Lymond and run his whole thing better than Lymond? Is he still thinking that? Or has Will, with his humiliation of the month prior, has he finally figured out that that's probably not going to happen anytime soon, and he's sort of he's a little more subdued now? I don't know. Also, bottom of page 171, Lymond talking about why Andrew Hunter got Crouch, because it was always a bit fishy how Andrew Hunter just made up this thing about how he wanted to exchange Crouch for another prisoner. It always felt fishy. And now Lymond is basically surmised that Andrew Hunter wanted Crouch so that he could lure in Lymond. He also says, and this is once again bottom of 171, that there's multiple reasons that Andrew Hunter wanted that, because, well, he had a price of 1,000 crowns on his head, so he would have made Andrew Hunter rich, and Lymond totally loves that he's a wanted man with that much money on his head, by the way, totally. And there was another reason that Lymond was saying, but then he didn't disclose it to anyone, about why Andrew was trying to lure in Lymond. So that's a little bit of a mystery that has yet to be uncovered. So there's still something going on with Andrew Hunter. Anyway, but I am totally obsessed with this scene of Lymond just coming in, sitting by the fire. Someone walked up and this is top of 171, just already had like a beer ready to go as he walked in. Like he's got things sorted, Lymond. He's got things so perfectly arranged and organized just to his liking. My God. But yeah, with regards to Lymond, like we know he must be a murderer. We've never actually, I don't think, on the page directly seen him murder someone in cold blood. In fact, I don't think we see many murders at all. Have we seen one? I don't think we have. But we know that Lymond has probably done lots of bad things to get where he wants to be. And we've seen him hurt a lot of people in the opening gambit as well. So we just never see it directly. It's just all indirect. So that's an interesting writing technique. I'm not sure how I feel about that. If we truly had a scene where we see Lymond kill someone, how would that affect us as readers? I mean, if this whole book was told through Lymond's POV, I don't think anyone would, like, we'd all be struggling to stomach that. It would be a very dark book indeed. This is probably why we don't go into his head very often. Bottom of page 172. So my theory, this is where Lymond says to Will, "Marigold, but you stare at me like a kitten with its dam or with its mother." And my theory is that Lymond sits down and says this, but Will wasn't even looking at him, but Lymond knows that it's just a sore spot in Will, so he said it anyway, regardless of whether or not Will was looking at him. It's either way, Will's just gonna be like really annoyed. And he was very annoyed. And then I was just not expecting the sudden turn of Lymond being like, okay, let's all go to the brothel. So unexpected. Oh, at the end of the day, he is just a man. Well, okay, we do know that he ended up going to the brothel for multiple things, but the way that it's described here is very suggestive that he just wanted to have some pleasure. Scott blushing again. Is Will a virgin? Do we have a poll on this somewhere? How old is Will? Is he a teenager? He's been in France. He can't be a virgin. He just acts like one. I love how Lymond is like, the question is, do we seek such madness? The answer is we do. He's trying to make his desire to have sex sound somewhat philosophical. It's okay, Lymond. It's fine. You're a man. We get it. Of course, now we know that he was going for multiple reasons, but in this moment, we didn't know that. So they ride out, and I really adore this line at the bottom of page 173 that just kind of struck a bit of fear into my heart, if I'm going to be honest, because seeing Lymond through Will's eyes is quite accurate, I think, for us readers, because Will, despite being a lot more bold than what I would personally be, still has enough youth and innocence about him that he's still getting shocked and confused, and all of these things are still so new to him. So he's such a good character. So it says here, nothing of the warm vulgarities of Branksome, or the artifice of the Louvre, or the ambitions, emotional expediencies of Holyrood had prepared him for the inhumanities of Lymond. It was such a good line. So nothing, we've just had earlier in the chapter here about how his father was talking about, Will be fine, he's been in France, surely nothing will shock him now. And Will is just admitting to himself, nothing prepared me for this. Nothing. It's just such a good comparison there. Inhumanities. It is a very strong word. What have we seen of inhumanities of Lymond so far? We've seen him do ridiculous things. We've seen him rob and burn his own house down. We've seen him confront his own brother, shoot his own brother. We've seen him be cruel to his mother. We've seen him ask Will to shoot one of his men, just like that. And every time that that Lymond has displayed something like pretty bad, we've also been given an equal and opposing little Easter egg of goodness about Lymond, or a little seed planted in our mind that he's doing this for a greater reason that is a good thing overall. That's what this whole back and forth of Lymond is. Like, he does something terrible and then we see, oh, but he's working towards this greater thing that we can see by him doing other things, and we kind of accept that. But we don't know if Lymond is good. We don't. Fine, I'm reserved on if Lymond is a good person or not. I really liked the interaction between Johnny and, was it Johnny? Yeah, Johnny and Will as they were riding to the Ostrich Inn. And Will is just like, he's not human. And Johnny's like, oh no, he's very human. We've seen it. I mean, my imagination just went too wild at that point. But yes, this is 174. He proved very human in September. So referring to the skirmish with Coulter and Erskine, we find out that he'd been hit in the back of his head with a stone and they had to rescue him, and then he ran off. It still doesn't give us a full explanation of how he ended up specifically right at the front of Christian's house, unconscious in a moat. We still don't have that total explanation, but at least we got a little bit. Because we're never going to get Lymond's POV, we're always going to have gaps in understanding, and that's okay. We can make connections. We're smart readers and stuff, right? So interesting, Johnny doesn't give it away that they found Lymond with Christian at, was it Bogle House where they were? Anyway, he didn't give that away to Will, so Will has no knowledge about Lymond's connection now with Christian. Not that we know that Will even knows who Christian is. I assume he would have known. He must know. He must know. They would all know each other. It's Scottish nobility. They would know each other, or at least know of each other. Really like the idea of Lymond being human. It's like I was saying before, we need like a drop of cruelty from Lymond, and then we need a drop of his humanity to balance it out so that we keep reading. This is the ultimate formula, right? To make any hungry readers just enjoy a character and feel like we're figuring him out in our own way. Like, the idea of Lymond being human is so cute and adorable. Was he scared? Like, when he didn't have his memories, was he fearful? Was he worried? Like, I mean, he would have been super dopey and confused and slow cognitively if he had concussion. Like, did he need help tying his bootlaces? Did he need someone to button his pants? I'm just gonna say, yeah, he needed help with that. I really enjoyed the description of them arriving at the Ostrich Inn and just how the lights came out of the fog. I thought it's just so wonderful that we have such great character interaction, but it's also interspersed with such a beautiful scenic picture that you can make in your head. Like, I really felt like I was walking alongside these people in the freezing fog and seeing these lights and in the distance and this sound coming out and smoked meats. It was just so wonderful. I've never been to Scotland, but I can imagine that. And we are not disappointed at Lymond's interaction with Molly. She's perfect. Molly is so perfect. I'm sorry, but she just is. I really love this. Is top of page 175. Molly being like, we thought we were abandoned, where were you? And Lymond's just like, why else are we here? As if, why else would men exist if not to be at a whorehouse? And his description of his eyes were sea blue and the expression was one of celestial affability. What a description. I'm sorry, we've just been reading about his coldness and inhumanity, and he just... Then we get this description? This is what I'm talking about. It's not fair. We're just trying to be humans here. Stop making my heart race when I'm reading a book, okay? Okay, so we get into this inn, and I really, once again, I love the description. I felt like I was right there, that I was like dancing around. It was just so good. I could smell everything and see everything, and it felt so warm. The whole interaction with John Maxwell was unexpected. I mean, we knew he was going to do something there that wasn't just the obvious, but I really liked how page 178, 179, and then top of 180, John Maxwell is so unimpressed at Lymond. Like, he genuinely is just like kind of annoyed at his self-aggrandizing self-confidence. So that's quite nice. I like that. And so this, I assume, once again, getting this through Will's POV. Will is really helpful sometimes because he's so confused, so he repeats things in his head. So Lymond has John Maxwell on his side because he feigned a kidnapping of John Maxwell and then rescued him from that. And now they're best buds, apparently. And they talked for a long time. We don't actually know what they talked about, so obviously this is going to be part of the plot in the future because we don't know about it. And then they go downstairs and Lymond does what every annoying extrovert does who has way too much energy and not enough activities to put it in places. He gets a bagpipes going. So this is like bottom of page 181, top of 182, Molly's absolute despair and how annoyed she is at herself for not closing the doors. And Lymond is seeing that there's a piper in one of the other rooms who apparently just has his pipes on him. It was just really funny because Lymond is like, why is everyone asleep? I'm here. I'm gonna pay money. Come on, just... Oh, he's the epitome of every extrovert that I hate. I would actually really struggle to be around Lymond all the time. He just needs to soak up all of the atmospheres and experience all of the things, and he doesn't care about stepping on people to get what he wants. Molly is super chill though. Like, it's implied that she's killed the husband at some point, her husband, in order to get this in. Like, she is not scared of Lymond. Rightly or wrongly? Probably wrongly. Or rightly. Would Lymond hurt a woman? That is a good question. I think Lymond would hurt a woman, now that I've thought about it. Because I think Lymond understands that everyone is capable of evil. Just so happens that women don't have the power to make the evil come true. I think he knows. And of course, all through these pages, once again, told through Will Scott's maybe virginal POV. So what do we get? We get nothing super juicy except the occasional mention of Lymond was nowhere to be seen. Lymond has disappeared. Fade to black. Okay. It's okay. We don't need that scene. We're not disappointed at all. But waking people up with the bagpipes or whatever sort of pipes they used, it was some sort of old pipes, is just the most Scottish thing. I do like the wrestling scenes, and I like that it was made... I mean, Lymond didn't lose any of his wrestling matches, and I was like, oh, come on, you could have made him lose at least 1 or 2 out of 10. But apparently he didn't lose any. All we got was that he was blotting the sweat from his eyes. Okay, so he was exerting himself. Sometimes I think Lymond is a little bit overpowered. Like, we saw him, how perfect a marksman he was with shooting his brother on purpose in a specific spot after getting a flying bird 5 seconds prior. Like, we get that he's good, but sometimes I wonder, is he too good physically? I mean, it's true that someone could just be really good at what they do, and he's obviously one of those people, but maybe he just holds his liquor well and everyone else was drunk when they were fighting him. But I do appreciate at least that he was sweating, because we get from a lot of other books that really overpowered characters who don't break a sweat doing ridiculous things. I imagine that Lymond was actually like dripping with sweat, because this room would have been so hot